feel weird sitting down doing this, to be honest with you.
That's okay.
Should I just do it standing up? Welcome to this week's video where I'm going to talk about the pool and what we did with our pool remodel. Now Sam's not here this week. He's left me to finish the house. If you guys have been following along, it looks like we're almost done, but there's always little things to do. As you can see, we finally have water in the pool. This water just got here. We've been dealing with this pool from way back in the beginning of the project, so I don't remember all the details, but I'm going to try and give you as many details as I can remember right now. If you saw the old pool, it was very dated. It had the red brick coping, it had the blue tiles, very old style pool. The shape is also a bean shape, and we don't like that. We want to square it off. We want to do a lot of things with this pool. We want to square it off. We threw out that idea. We threw out the idea of moving the pool to that side of the yard. There was a bunch of ideas thrown out, but so I moved inside because it was actually really hot outside. I just wanted to jump into the pool, but I don't think our videographer would appreciate that while I wear his microphone. So starting with the pool, we started with the demo phase. We decided to demo the coping while we were demoing the house because they had the jackhammers here already, and we just said, get it all done right away. Now looking back, that probably was not the best idea because what we learned later in the project was that cracked our pipes. The demo guys were not very careful when they were taking out the coping, and it caused a lot of cracked pipes. When we were getting quotes for the pool, everybody that gave us a quote said, hey, do you know if your pipes are cracked? We gotta check it, we can pressure test it, or we gotta dig it up and check it. Sam kept telling them, no, my pipe's not cracked, my pipe's not cracked. Spend the money on a pressure test. So we wasted $400 on a pressure test, and just turns out that the pipes were cracked. Everybody told us that they're probably going to be cracked based on the damage, but Sam didn't want to listen to anybody, and we ended up having to spend the money on fixing the plumbing as well. Pro tip is, if you're going to be demoing your pool coping or around your pool at all, you got to be very careful, otherwise you will crack the plumbing of your pool and you will have to replace all of that. That was an added expense that nobody wants to have, so make sure that any demo around the pool is done very carefully. So after we demoed the coping, we let the pool sit for a very long time and we did nothing with it until we figured out what we're gonna do. We talked about moving it, but we got quoted like $60,000 plus for that, so that was definitely not in the budget. After we figured out who we're gonna go with to redo our pool, we had to go ahead and pull permits. Now we pulled a replaster permit that said combo mechanical electrical, which means we are going to redo our mechanicals, our plumbing, and our electrical, as in the pool equipment. When we got that permit, we were really excited to get everything done all the right way. We even went ahead and decided to do a split drain. Now, traditional pools come with only one drain at the bottom of the pool, and that is a safety hazard. So now, anytime you do a new pool, you must have more than one drain. We technically didn't need to do a split drain with our replaster permit, but we went ahead and took that extra step and wanted to do the split drain. Now that ended up biting us because our inspector was not happy that we demoed the floor of our pool to install a split drain.
And you're not even supposed to chip out the old, niche.
What had happened was opened up the old drain, made spots for 2 new drains. We also opened up the skimmer to replace all that. And the inspector said, hey, you demoed into the shell of your pool, and now this is no longer a replaster permit. This is a problem. You need to get an engineer involved, and you need a whole new permit.
You gotta get a remodel permit.
So he wanted to send us back to plan check and get all new permits, and we obviously did not want to do that for time reasons. What we ended up doing is we talked to a supervisor, we showed him pictures of what's going on, and the supervisor said, hey, don't send them to get a new permit, just have an engineer sign off on this or check it. So that's exactly what we did. So we found an engineer to check our pool and say that we were good on how it was set up, how the rebar is and all that, and we were good to go with our split drain and our new skimmer. Now my pro tip is don't break into the shell of your pool because you don't know how your inspector is going to react to that. They might end up sending you to an engineer to get it all checked out. They might send you back to plan check and start the whole permit process over, which will eat up a lot more time. Fortunately for us, the supervisor said, hey, just get an engineer to sign off and we'll let it go with your current permits because you already had combo mechanical on there. But if it was just a replaster, we would have a big problem here. Once we got that engineer's drawing approved and we closed up our split drain and our skimmer, it was time to do the coping of the pool. Now what we ended up doing is a pour-in-place concrete with a broom finish for our new coping. We thought this was gonna be the best option, but again, we didn't know much about pools and our pool contractor didn't really help us out in this department. They told us it's the same thing, it's not gonna be a big deal to do precast concrete or a pour-in-place concrete. Now we learned this the hard way again, and I would not recommend doing a pour-in-place concrete unless you really like that style. The reason I don't recommend it is because the precast stuff gets manufactured, it'll be perfect. All the pieces will look the same as one another. When you're doing a pour-in-place, it is all hand done. It's not gonna look as uniform as a precast would have. The other problem with a pour-in-place is if it's not done properly, you can have cracks, can have areas where you don't like, and we definitely have some areas that we're not too happy with. Now, on top of that, the broom finish actually ended up being very rough for us. If you watched our concrete video, link up here, you'll see that we sandblasted our backyard because of a top cast issue. We actually took that opportunity with the sandblaster here to sandblast the broom finish coping to make it not as rough. Once we did that, we noticed more cracks in our pour-in-place. So again, do not recommend pour-in-place. Go with the precast, it costs the same. After we had the coping in place, we had to get the tile installed. We went around and picked out what type of tile we want. There's a couple different types, and the main ones that I know of is the regular porcelain tile, glass tile, which is the higher end expensive, and then you have a recycled glass, which is in between the two. Now we went with a recycled glass because it was not expensive as regular glass and not as cheap as porcelain. It's kind of in between. That's what we were going for. So we bought the recycled glass and had it installed. Once all the tile was in, it was time for us to get our enclosure signed off by our building and safety inspector. Now we had a lot of problems with that, which led to having 7 enclosure inspections before we finally passed our pool enclosure. Let's go outside and talk about what we learned on enclosure, because we learned a ton. Okay, now I'm outside in the front yard where we have our 2 side gates, this one and the other side. Now, we really like the design of this gate, so that's what we had installed, but the inspectors did not like this gate. This type of gate is not good for your pools for a couple reasons. First of all, these openings are too large. Now, the mentality is a kid under 5 years old could put their feet into here and climb up. These slits, I believe, have to be under 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. And ideally, they'll be vertical that nobody can actually use them to climb up. That was one of the problems with our gates. Now what we did get right here is opening the gate outwards. Gates have to open outwards towards the street, and they need to be self-closing and self-latching. So we have special hinges here that make the gate self-closing, and we used to have a latch up here that made it self-latching. We've taken that out because if you saw in the beginning of the video, we have a pool fence, but those are important features that need to be on your gate. The other thing is this latch needs to be 60 inches from the ground. So ours was exactly 60. The gate manufacturer had made it too close to perfect. That the inspectors didn't like that either. If you're gonna do this type of gate or a different design that's not climbable, make sure to make it a little bit taller so that you don't have an issue with the inspector and your latch. So now let's go to the side yard so we can talk about another reason why these gates did not work for us. So I'm over here on the other side of the house where you can see the other self-latching gate and this wall. This wall is in between our property and the neighbor's property. And one of the issues with passing your enclosure inspection for your pool is the height of your fences. Now, if I measure this fence here, it is only 45 inches on this side and about 53 on the neighbor's side. One of the things that they're concerned about is little kids jumping over the fence, jumping into your pool when nobody's home, and drowning in your pool. A really unfortunate thing, and one of the problems is this fence is not high enough. This fence needs to be at least 5 feet tall, same as the gates, but we don't have that here. So theoretically, a kid could jump over and drown in our pool. So this was not good enough for the inspector. No matter of us getting the self-latching gates, the self-closing gates, the alarms on our exterior doors, all these things were still not good enough for our inspector because this is not tall enough. Now, this being the neighbor's wall, we didn't want to touch it. We didn't want to go up on it because it would be very costly, which led us to having to pay for a pool fence all the way around our pool. Let's go look at that. Now here you can see our beautiful pool fence. No, it's not really beautiful. Honestly, it's very ugly and it closes off the backyard quite a bit. But for safety reasons, they make us put this in. One of the key notes here is this is 5 feet tall. If I measure it, it's actually just over 5 feet tall. Couple key elements that this helps out is you don't need to have door alarms. You don't need the self-latching gates on your side yards. You don't need to worry about this fence being high enough, that fence being high enough. This eliminates all those problems, creates a more visual problem for you, as well as getting into your pool problem. You almost always need 2 hands to get into this pool, and you can see the door lock is all the way up here, way out of reach for kids. Now, we don't really like the way that this fence looks, and they make you make it permanent. Can't put a temporary fence in. So when we first had this fence installed, it was not bolted into our concrete. Inspector came out and said, hey, this fence is not permanent. This is not gonna fly. If you look down below, you can see that all the posts are now bolted into the concrete. That makes this fence passable for your enclosure inspection. We went ahead and got this done so that we can finally plaster our pool. So once the inspector said, okay, your pool is now nice and safe and protected, but you forgot your grounding wire. So they still didn't pass for our enclosure until we had a grounding wire installed for both of our pool lights. One in the pool, one in the spa. It's just a green wire that they put with a special type of epoxy glue that's waterproof. They make sure that that's in. We called for another inspection. They checked it. It was good. Then we finally were able to plaster. Now, when they came over here to plaster, they asked us what color we want it, how gray we want it. We said, give us dark gray. They even asked us if we wanted a black plaster, which would have been interesting. And had we been a little more risky, we probably would have done it. And we kind of regret not doing it. I think it would have looked cool to have a black plaster. I think that's unique. But we went with a dark gray. When they were plastering, it was a very wet consistency. It was a lot wetter than I thought. I thought the plaster would be a lot thicker. They plastered all the walls in the spa, all over the pool. They had special shoes on so that they don't mess up the plaster as they're troweling it throughout the whole pool. They made it nice and smooth, ready to go for water. Once that was all done, they started filling the pool up using a rag on a hose so that the water isn't too rough on the plaster. Me and Sam thought that was not fast enough, so we actually added a second hose, and that probably was a mistake because I had to check the cameras every 2 hours at night. I set an alarm for every 2 hours to wake up and make sure the pool is not overflowing. That was not fun for me. I showed up the next morning, the pool was a little overfilled. I stopped the water, pulled out the hoses, and we were ready for startup. Pool startup is very important once your pool is plastered. If the startup is not done correctly, all that plaster was for naught, and you would have to drain your pool again and redo it. Now, our pool contractor recommended a startup person, so we had that person come out here and do the startup. When it first started, this pool was very murky. All that plaster dust stays in the water and you can't see the bottom. Today's day 4 of the startup and it is very clear, this pool. We're very happy with how this turned out, and it's pretty hot out here. I just want to jump in. Unfortunately, the startup guy said we cannot jump in for another 2 weeks. That was his recommendation. So we're gonna leave it as is. We're not gonna disturb the pool. Let's go inside and talk about the numbers. So how much did this all cost? Now, as usual, we got a bunch of quotes from many different contractors to deal with our pool, get it from start to finish. They all range from $20,000 to about $32,000. Where we settled at was a $24,000 bid from our pool contractor. Now, this $24,000 did not include the equipment, and because we already had a pump that was a good pump with a VFD on it, you want to make sure your pump has a VFD on it, so it is a high efficiency pump. The inspector will check this. We already had that. We only bought a new filter and a new heater. The new filter and heater cost us $2,650. We also needed to pay for our permits for replastering the pool with the mechanical and electrical. That cost us $428.31 for the fees paid to the city. Finally, I talked about the startup. The startup for our size pool was $750. That's what the contractor contractor quoted us. He said it's dependent on the size of the pool, the shape of the pool, and how much chemicals is needed to bring the pool up into balance. With the startup, he's cleaning all the plaster off for a few days. He's adding chemicals and doing all that. $750 for all that. Combined total, we spent $27,828.31 to get our pool completely remodeled. New tile, new plaster, split drain, all of that. I hope you guys liked this video. Hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and hit the notification bell. We're uploading every Saturday, hopefully sometime Sunday. Like last week, we had to do it on Sunday. But we'll get a video out to you every week. Make sure to follow along. When Sam gets back, we should be done with the house.